Hello, and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. My name is Gareth, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, not only a special guest, but actually a long time, very good friend of mine, Simon Courtney. I'm just going to give it's just a very brief introduction on Simon. Simon is a trauma-informed psychotherapist and coach with experience in group facilitation and a particular interest in both developmental, ancestral, and collective trauma. Simon also works to help embody spirituality. Simon, welcome to the show. Good
Yeah,
to have you.
great to be here finally after some attempts.
I've known Simon for, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years, around that kind of time. And we became very good friends. And I've spent quite a lot of time with Simon, and he's actually a really good friend. He's always been there for me. He's got a great skill set, really like incredible, such a clear human and just a great person. I'm very happy to have him here. So Simon, yeah.
I'm really touched by your introduction. Thank
Well,
you.
it's the
Yeah.
truth. I always consider you like a really good friend that I can, it's like I don't see you for a while, but then as soon as we chat, it's like just straight back there. Like yeah,
Mm.
there's been no time in between. Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to have a great conversation today. I'm really interested to bring your work and what you do to the audience. And I mean, I'd love to get started by you just giving us
Mm.
a little bit of feedback on like how you got started on your journey of healing and
Mm.
spirituality. And yeah.
Okay. Wow. Where to begin? I think I always had a deep interest in spirituality, or I mean, I was raised Catholic in Ireland, so it was the church and it was God. And so I always grew up actually in my teens, always praying as a child, praying. This was one of my something that always kind of followed me through my early life. Maybe something I never fully appreciated, but something that was deep within me. And then in my late teens, like many teens, probably even earlier, I started to question many things. I was from my studies, and I was studying science at the time in university. And this led me to kind of question many things logically, but it kept my curiosity kept going, kept being curious. And actually it was one of our talks where you introduced me to the work of a physicist called Tom Campbell at one point. I think it was
I
in my
remember.
in my early 20s, yeah. And I remember devouring one of his books on my big theory of everything and his perspective as a physicist of the nature of reality. And so I think this was towards the end of my time in college studying science, and it was just kind of things were happening. I think I was just opening different realms or spaces inside myself that I had never really touched, but had like a voracious appetite. I devoured his huge book, as you know, it's like trilogy in one, and then many other books. And I think I was just like many people seeking something, seeking answers, something doesn't feel answered in me about what I learned in church, maybe, or wasn't fully satisfied on a very personal level. And then in terms of my healing path, I specialized in human genetics, and I was really curious about the building blocks of life, always trying to get down to the core, but I always felt a bit removed from people. So I decided actually I would go into medicine. So I spent a year working in a hospital as a nurse's assistant or a healthcare assistant and did my medical entrance exams and went to Scotland to study medicine in Aberdeen University. But it didn't grasp me the way I thought it might. Um, Working with people was there, but what I realized in that year I had between studying science and going to medicine in the hospital, it was just speaking to people, getting to know people while I was helping them, helping them walk to the toilet or whatever it was, the small things. It was actually just the connection. It was
The
connected
human,
to that person.
the
Yeah.
human connection. Yeah.
And it also took me a while I was like, that's what I was doing. That's what I was actually craving. Getting to know, being curious about who are they. And so that I would say that kind of also inspired me in a different way to kind of eventually, after then many years leaving medicine.
What was that like, Simon? How was that decision?
Yeah.
And I know, obviously, when somebody's involved in medicine and
Mm.
studying, there's family involved, right? Usually there's someone. So how did
Yeah.
that go down?
All right. It didn't go down so well.
Yeah,
I
I
think
kind of
there was
feel partly to blame for that one as well.
there was a lot of I think there was a lot of good wishes for me to do it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it just didn't touch me the way I thought it would. It didn't spark or light up that inner flame or touch my heart the way I thought it would. And it was, yeah, actually, it's great that you ask. It was probably one of the defining moments when I decided to leave medicine and take the risk, continue working. I was working in a nursing home to pay for my studies and to pay for my accommodation at the time in Scotland. So I just continued working in the nursing home and then I went traveling and traveling to different teachers, studying spirituality. But that you're right, that decision was, it felt pivotal. It felt like a pivotal moment where I had no backup, kind of. I didn't feel like dropping back into a master's or PhD in science, and I had no idea of what was waiting. But somehow I knew that this was not my path.
That was a fork in the road, right? That was
Right,
like your whole
right.
life could have veered this way, or you chose spirituality, right? You went traveling. You went to India and America and you sought out
Mm.
lots of different teachers. So do you want to lead us a little bit into that? What you discovered?
It was this, I think I was just like meaning making and like sense. I was trying to make sense of life in a way. And spirituality for me at that time, it felt like a great way to answer so many questions I had. It was
Mm,
already giving me kind of answers in a way. And I think this is where it kind of dovetails perfectly into eventually where I came to studying psychotherapy and counseling, coaching, doing the work that I'm interested in now. I could see that so much was a yearning and a striving and a seeking for something greater, God, or an ultimate kind of reality, self with a big S.
yeah.
And I could also see that there were like a lot of layers of avoidance, or as termed spiritual bypassing.
And I'd love to get to that, right?
Yeah,
That's something I
yeah,
really want to talk to you about in this
yeah,
conversation. Yeah, spiritual bypass. And
yeah.
so I also remember you actually becoming a little bit depressed after reading Tom Campbell's Theory of Everything. It was a bit,
Right,
his concept was all based around everything is a virtual reality. And
right,
it is, it can be quite cold, right? So, I
right.
mean, you decided to drop out of medicine or divert your studies away. You read Tom's book, and I guess you're faced with this sort of dilemma now, right?
Right.
Because I know you, and I know with you, everything is human connection, right? It's relationships, it's understanding,
Mm.
meaning. So, what did you find when you went on your travels?
Let me see. I found that, yeah, you're right, that when I read Tom's book, instead of maybe appreciating it for what it was a physicist using a very kind of concrete way of using scientific language, like thermodynamic kind of language of entropy and
Yeah,
enthalpy. And it was just a bit cold for what I think my heart was yearning for.
yeah.
But it definitely broadened something in my awareness. But what I realize is I come up here to say it broadened so much understanding, but it didn't feel like any of it really trickled down into the rest of my body or being. So I would say what happened then for those next few years was kind of trying to understand again, how do I apply this to my life? How does that actually look like? Or is it just an escape into something bigger and then I'm a bit checked out from life?
So, would you say that his concepts were like a paradigm shift, like conceptually?
In a way, yeah, like introducing the Heisenberg uncertainty principle of when you observe a particle of light, whether it's a
Yeah,
wave or a particle,
yeah.
things like this that I hadn't studied in school kind of opened my mind a lot that I hadn't heard of.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But
So,
yeah, you're right. But I would say just that those years then, just to kind of answer your question a bit, was really trying to place and simply put my awareness more in my body, like really like this physical body and maybe even energetic awareness.
mm.
What happens in my heart when you're speaking or when I feel a decision? Is it just a logical left hemisphere type rational dissection, or am I really listening to what's my intuition, what's my gut, what's my heart, where do I feel called, even if it doesn't make sense. This is kind of those years afterwards, traveling to Spain, to the United States. I traveled then to Bali for a month, a little bit confused, I remember. And then, so I'm jumping a bit ahead, but it's still part of it. After I left the States, where I was volunteering with girls with cerebral palsy, and then in a yoga retreat center. Again, just taking time to figure things out, let everything land, because so many concepts were there. I decided to go to Bali for a month, kind of with this bit of money that I had. And it was there where I was just in a small little house with a Balinese family in the middle of the island, because I wanted to have that kind of different experience from Ubud. Or it just kind of really came to me again. It's psychotherapy, working with people, kind of applying and learning what I love, which I think what I was running away from all the time was a deep love of humanity, of us, of my family, of the mess that we're in, kind of. And that kind of again was another pivotal moment. The leaving medicine and then leaving my travels to come back, came back to Ireland, studied, did my master's and all my hours of trainings. And here I am now, kind of. But now I'm, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can
So
talk about more then.
yeah, okay. And I remember because yeah, you kind of turned up. I got to know you sort of like we had some common interests in working out and going to the gym. And then you disappeared for a couple of years. Didn't see you for a while. We kept in contact, over the phone, but then all of a sudden you arrived back and we kind of took up that friendship again. And we actually went and we did some retreats together. I mean, we've done quite a bit, right? I remember doing a Native American sweat lodge with you. You got to witness me throwing up driving home out of the window after doing that. And we've done some great things. We've gone to
Yeah.
quite a few
Yeah.
teachers, and we had a lot in common with some of the teachers we followed,
Mhm.
and very similar path. But you chose to go down the real embodiment, right? Relationships,
Yeah.
psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So what was the draw with that versus
Yeah.
the other route, right? Awareness,
Mhm.
transcending, in some circumstances, avoidance and spiritual bypassing, right? I noticed that you wanted to do the things that were really uncomfortable. I remember some of the things you were telling me you were doing, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah. You chose really to go into it, right? Rather than avoid it.
That's a good word you use, though. Choice. I chose. In a way, maybe like yourself and many people who watch your podcast. I think there's moments in your life, like with medicine or when I was coming back from Bali, where it's kind of like a choiceless choice, if that makes sense. It's just so clear. It's so much part of who you are, or I don't know if you want to use the word a blueprint of what you're here to do, maybe, without trying to
Mm.
sound too esoteric.
It
But there's
sounds perfect to
something,
me.
yeah, where life calls you and guides you, and it's just a surrender. So for me, it was in a way, when I hear you say them back, it was just clear. I wasn't judging any path in particular as good or bad. It was just clear that's where life was guiding me. Yeah, into this kind of, into the relational stuff, into the places where we have difficulty in ourselves, in relationships, in our triggers and our reactions, how we show up in the world with our family and in community and in society. I realized that for so long I had kind of been, I've been trying to do this to it, but it was so clear this is so much part of what I am here to do, or to uncover in myself. So along the way, I've also been like the path of awareness, like you said, meditating, and but I haven't put all my energy there. I put most of my energy into, yeah, going down this, we'll say, relational path.
So clearing the human, right, before awakening, or simultaneously to
And yeah,
awakening.
right, in a
Yeah.
way. Ken Wilber has those kind of ways of putting it. Waking up, which is transcendent practices of subject
Yeah.
object transcendence. And then, of course, there's cleaning up, growing up, and showing up. And I was very interested in the cleaning up and the growing up, because
Why?
I could
Why?
feel so many layers of immaturity in my system without judging them. Like it
Yeah.
would just could feel and this place, when I get to this place, I see the world from either a very simplistic, either naive, or kind of a young way of relating to life. And because I could just feel that, I was like, I need to tend to this. This
Uh,
needs my attention.
And when you say feel it, right? Well, okay, for the listeners and the viewers, how do they do that? How do they tune into their bodies to feel that, to feel, to be able to know that in their own systems, to be able to kind of make them informed choices that you did? Like you said, you kind of mentioned it was like a blueprint, but it's almost like you have to really come into the body to be able to find that blueprint, right?
Yeah, I would say inclusion of the body for me has been, it should be so natural in a way, but for me it wasn't. I was very disconnected. I was very much in my head, very much also anywhere but my head sometimes. So it was a conscious effort to sometimes just sit and just do a body scan, maybe just feel, place my awareness in my heart center, come down into my belly and just get to know, where am I in my body and where am I not? Where am I present and where am I absent? And
Mm.
that the absence or the numbness maybe has information. There's a reason why maybe I don't feel my belly or my solar plexus. I feel disconnected, and there's a reason why I feel tight in my chest maybe, or my shoulders or whatever. And then I just to be gentle with that in a way.
And these were things that were, these were like pointers that were turning up for you.
Exactly that time period you asked me about, from leaving medicine to kind of coming back to Ireland to study psychotherapy, that whole, whatever that was, 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years, I'm not quite sure at the
Mm.
time. That was really just doing that, really also meditation, of course, but a lot of coming into the body as much as I could. And I
Mm.
would say I still am in different ways,
Mm.
maybe more subtle layers, but definitely it's an ongoing experience.
Mm.
So there's so much in our body where if there's certain contractions, they are there for a good reason. That's kind of how I approach my work, either with trauma or my psychotherapy coaching and counseling. That and why it's applicable to spirituality is because it's all about identity in a way. Identification also forms in the body, in contractions, in absence, in ways where perceiving reality is often showing up also in your body. So noticing symptoms relationally, symptoms in your life, in your business, and with money, they'll be pointers in a way where I think you can kind of see, okay, how am I making sense? How am I relating to myself or the world? And to just see, and how does that live in me? How does Gar live in me right now?
Yeah.
Or how
Yeah.
does the world live in me? When I look at the news, does these images I see, can I connect, or are they just abstract things that I'm watching, kind of?
Because Gar is just a mirror back of what is really in me anyway, right? Or the news is just reflecting back. And I guess, you know, I do a lot of work with people as well, and everything is coming back to like, okay, yes, I can have spiritual awakenings, right? I can transcend, but we're always coming back into our bodies, right? We're always faced with other humans, right? Who are just holding a mirror up of what we are, what's unresolved in us. And as soon as we come back into the body, right, we may have transcended for a period of time, right? And it may be
Right,
great there. But then we come back straight into what you would call the marketplace, right? You come back from the
right,
cave into the marketplace
right.
and you're faced with your own
Yeah.
stuff in other
Mhm.
people. So
Exactly.
can you talk a little bit about that, Simon?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think that's the beginning of the cultivation, maybe of wisdom, and you can really bring down, shall we say, or really embody these higher states of transcendence or higher states of consciousness. If that can really live in you in a way, that's a beautiful transmission to life,
Mhm.
where this can touch every cell of your body in a way. Otherwise, it may be that this is, I think, maybe one thing that on my path I was really surprised. I had this very naive idea in my early 20s when I was reading all these books. Oh, you wake
Yeah,
up and everything's grand.
yeah,
Everything's great, you know?
yeah.
And it was such a kind of a shock to see how I was viewing that, to see in the world, in different teachers, maybe that, they're still human. They're still human. They still have their issues or unresolved things, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But just because maybe they've reached any kind of awakened state, and there's many, I'm sure this doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't take away the fact that your humanness is still there,
Mm.
that maybe unprocessed stuff is still there from your past, from your attachment wounding from childhood, that may be showing up in your relationships with your students or in a spiritual community. And then there's been many of those across the world that even Netflix has made
It doesn't go so
documentaries about.
well.
Yeah, it's tending to our humanness, the roots of the leaf. We love the branches, but at least I did, and the leaves, but I didn't always tend to the roots from coming down.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's the start of wisdom in a way, as I understand it, like really bringing down, grounding what you realized. Or I think we were once talking, you said to me about levels of consciousness, and I said, and what about embodied levels of
Yeah.
consciousness?
Yeah.
And I was like, that for me felt important from my path, kind of.
Yeah. I think you coined that, Simon. That's we'll name that after you. Which is so okay, right? So we've both been around lots of different teachers, right? And it's clear just because an individual can transcend, right? Can have a huge awakening, can reach great stages of enlightenment, that it doesn't necessarily clear up the human, right? They can be really
Mm,
messy individuals. They can actually do an awful lot of damage to people,
mm.
because they haven't chose to work on the human side and the interpersonal skills.
Or they may, as sometimes my experience has been when I've maybe watched people on YouTube or met different people,
Mm.
whether they're teachers or not, actually, is that it's also like it's a 1D kind of awareness inside themselves. Like in all of us, we all have 1D where it's not, we're not aware of it. We're not aware of something
So it's a blind
until
spot.
it's a blind spot,
Yeah.
exactly. And so you can only notice your blind spots through others, through symptom, through relation often,
Mm.
or as a psychotherapist through supervision, talking it out. I had a hard case the other day with a client, and through the relation, through reflecting, yeah, that was my thing. And I brought that to the client. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I love that, Simon, right? That we can see it in ourselves. I mean, that's the goal, right? It's so easy to see it in other people, right? And point the finger and say,
Mm,
that's not my fault. That's that person's fault. They
right.
did it to me. How
Right.
dare they, right? From my understanding is, right, anything that triggers something in us, it's really about us and not the other person.
Right. Well, that's the invitation then, isn't it? I think one person gave me that kind of, it's a great little way. I've often used it. Whenever you're doing this, notice the three fingers pointing back at you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a great way to kind of look at agency. How am I contributing to this? What's my role in this? Can I take a few moments to see what's happening in me rather than going straight to the other? Because going straight to the other, blaming or whatever it is, it helps me not be with myself. I
Mm,
don't have to look or feel what's happening in me.
yeah.
And maybe there's grief actually underneath the anger. Maybe just before I get rageful or something happens, maybe I'm just really sad that you didn't tell me how nice I look today. And then I start attacking you about something.
I
Just
told you look very well actually before we started,
I
Simon.
know, and that's why I didn't get triggered.
Sorry, just agency. That agency has been coming up quite a bit. Just give me your rundown on agency, Simon.
So there's one thing I like from Viktor Frankl's work, and I'm gonna probably butcher this kind of quote, but between in the decision-making process, if there's not an organizing self kind of that's happening in between, there's either a stimulus and a reaction. And agency is kind of increasing that window in a way of this organizing self of how am I relating to myself, to what's happening to me, to the world, and to this other person, maybe. So it's a way of organizing my inner world and my outer world.
And that's us. That's the doer, right? With a memory and feelings, and we're able to use our free will, right? Our beingness. Would I be right
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
It,
Okay.
like when you say doer, say a little bit more.
Well,
Maybe this is where we can, yeah,
yeah.
find a common language here with agency and
Okay, so how I would like, okay, so one of the things in spirituality is, right, everybody wants to get to the self, right? Self is
Mhm.
just awareness. There's not an awful lot of talk about our beingness, right? Our decision space, our choice to choose love over fear, right?
Right.
Our free will decision space, right? Because there is a being
Right.
here as well. There's not, we're not
Mhm.
just awareness, we are human.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So it's how we, exactly as you said it, are we really relating to ourselves in the moment, or are we in a kind of habitual reaction? Often in the work that I do and that I've been studying, sometimes the word is used like a strategy. Sometimes one of the strategies to not touch maybe on certain parts of my nervous system, one might be to start blaming or reacting, or be like a default kind of emotion of anger I might go to as a default, because that's better than maybe a more primary feeling of grief. So I think there with the beingness that you were mentioning, I think that's important because that's where agency, maybe being with more of your essence or that beingness was really threatening at some point of your life. So disconnecting or fragmenting kind of your inner time and space was way safer and better than staying connected to yourself. And so that then ripples or echoes into the future, into your present moment.
And
So
your
you're actually
relationships.
exactly. So I'm not actually maybe fully connected or related to my beingness, but more to my identity as a reaction. And so that's where I find it how psychotherapy or this kind of work in spirituality can so beautifully meet, because it's often the process of de-identification, or in spirituality, transcend,
Mm,
subject object transcendence. And so that principle can be applied to both spirituality and psychotherapy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, just another thing, Simon, as well. I noticed that we can never truly understand another person, or where, if somebody says something to us, right, it's filtered through our memory, our
Mm.
ideas, we
Right.
have all of these kind of concepts in our head, right? So we can
Mm.
never really know another person and how they use their language, right? And a lot
Mhm.
of the times people take offense, they get upset,
Mhm.
and there may be no malice in that whatsoever. It's just wires get crossed in communications,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I notice is when I do retreats, I have such a mix of different cultures, different
Mm.
countries, and people have different senses of humor, right? Depending
Yeah.
on where
Right.
they come from. And,
Absolutely.
what could be funny to Irish people might not be so funny to someone from, a foreign country. How do we navigate that? Because that's just, there seems to
Yeah.
be layers and
Yeah. Right.
layers to
Exactly.
this.
Yeah. And this is, I think, where we find our deepest humanity together, or our common or shared humanity. And I think this is where we go, where we can honor our diversity and our differences as part of our as the relationship, what's happening in between us, and also how, like when I said earlier, also how does Gar live in me? Like when I take a moment to just connect with you, what do I feel in me?
Mm,
So I go beyond maybe my ideas of you being Irish or our friendship, but that also is in me. That's also part of it. But what do I feel when we connect? Maybe I feel tightness in my heart, or maybe I feel something happening in my belly. And then I can just see, I can own that that's what I'm feeling. But I notice when I'm connecting with Gar, that's what's arising.
mm,
So I think it's kind of, again, back to the body and embodiment, it's kind of clearing the inner perceptive lens as much as we can through meditation practices, which I think are wonderful
yeah.
for getting clarity and inner space, cultivating inner space. And then also the sensing. How do I sense life? How do I sense another person, even if they're from halfway across the world? How do
Mm,
I, when I walk into a room where there's been an argument, you can feel
yeah.
tension, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that kind of cultivating that awareness of that relational space. And I think that's something that really interests me, that I've been practicing kind of not just for my work, but for, I have a wife and two girls also for my family life, for my life in the world. I think it helps me more than what I was used to growing up, which was kind of, yeah, maybe I don't want to feel this. Maybe this is too much for me. Or
And it's a very Irish thing as well, right? Not to look at your feelings or talk about your feelings, or almost you can be shamed, right? Growing up in Ireland, if you kind of venture into this and try and talk about it with,
right.
especially our generation, our parents' generation as well, they just
Yeah,
didn't go there.
exactly. For good reasons, like you said,
Yeah,
maybe there was humiliation or shame or rejection or but yeah, I mean, yeah, we as Irish people have our unique flavor, but as you said, every culture has their own kind of nuanced flavor of how their culture disconnects maybe or doesn't feel emotion or so
mm,
the Irish or the German or the United States, everyone has their own way. And that got me interested in collective trauma also. Exactly what you're naming kind of because I grew up in Ireland myself. I was born in Australia and then coming to Ireland when I was 5. And yeah, I think that was part of that call that we spoke about earlier. Something didn't feel right in myself. Not as a judgment, but it was like I really wanted to connect to so many people. And I found that I couldn't, not because of them, but also something in me and something in the atmosphere between us. And then my own reactions as a little boy to that. And
sh
it
and
made me question
shame.
many things. And
Lot of
shame.
shame, lot of
Yeah.
shame. I remember being a kid, and you actually couldn't reach out to another boy, right, and
Mhm.
tell them how you felt or you were friends for
Right.
fear of being ridiculed, made fun
Right.
of.
Yeah.
You just couldn't go there, right? You couldn't relate, you couldn't communicate that to your friends.
Right. And as I said earlier, the philosophy I bring is there's often a good reason for what's there. Even if
Mm,
it looks highly dysfunctional, there's a reason maybe why there's a culture of shame on some level of society or in a
mm,
collective, that shame has a function in the collective psyche. And maybe it's often I see it kind of like a lid on a pot that
yeah,
shame keeps down something
yeah,
that was too much to feel. And collectively, you can look at our history. Like right now, I'm co-facilitating a lab or kind of a group experience over a year on the Irish famine and its impacts in our lives today as Irish people or in the Irish diaspora. And I think it's just honoring what was too much to be felt. When a million people die because of starvation or disease, or a million people emigrate and leave, that has profound impacts on a population, on a collective.
mm.
And that has ramifications into the future.
Still
And
here.
it's
Yeah,
still here energetically, behaviorally, epigenetically. This is
yeah,
all these studies are coming out. We're finding out it's still here. Slavery, the Holocaust,
yeah,
it's the Soviet Union collapse.
yeah.
It's all, if it hasn't been digested and integrated in an embodied integration, I do this integrated in the soma of the collective, then there's something we're all doing this. And when we're all doing this, something here, then there's no free will. That's agency then.
Mm.
That's where we come back to Viktor Frankl's thing. There's no organizing self. Therefore, this can dictate our destiny in a way. We have no free will there. So that got me interested because again, we come back to spirituality, we come back to choices, we come back to transcend and include and transcend. As often, again, I like the work of Ken Wilber there. How can we include something, not get identified with it, but and then transcend it? Like a baby crawls and then walks. They include the crawling and transcend to walking, but they can still crawl if they fall down
Yeah,
because that baby included it.
yeah.
That's a lot. I just talked about quite fast.
Beautiful. It's really beautiful, Simon. And funny, actually, I on Sunday evening I watched the film Michael Collins. Yeah, I don't know, it just popped up on my screen and I just decided to watch it with the kids. Yeah, I mean, stuff like that has such a big impact, especially in Ireland, right? One of the things I always noticed was a lot of Irish people, when they communicate with one another, they almost cover their mouth in public. or they'll speak really lowly compared to like you
Mhm.
go to the UK or America, people are just talking freely. So
Mhm.
again, that has come somehow from fear of the British Army who took over. But that's what we're talking about, right?
It's funny, my dad is from the north of Ireland, so obviously he
Yeah.
grew up during the Troubles. And one thing that it's funny you say, one thing I noticed sometimes talking with when I was up there as a boy, some people would whisper when there was no need to whisper.
Mm.
And for me, as I
Yeah.
grew older, I kind of, okay, because it really wasn't safe.
Wasn't safe.
If you were growing up on the border with Monaghan, you didn't know if it was maybe an IRA or the UVF or something like this. You didn't, it was really not safe.
Yeah.
So when it's not safe, of course, this happens or any kind of things that protect us. And that's, I think, such an important key that I've been finding in my work. And for myself, as I have to do my own psychotherapy regularly, just honoring what we had to do in this life as Simon and Gar, and ancestrally, my parents and grandparents going back, that it was good what happened. It was functional. It maybe not was always generative in a healthy, positive way, but it helped keep something down or out of sight or something that was too overwhelming.
Hmm.
And I think that applies collectively, ancestrally, and individually.
Yeah. And again, coming back to relationship, right? We get someone who's grown up in that, and all of a sudden they're met with people from a different culture. A lot of confusion going on, right? Because you have here someone from Ireland who's afraid to be heard, covering their mouth when they're speaking, and you have, outspoken American people. It's
Mm.
like, what's wrong with this Irish person? Why do they act that way, right? When there's really nothing wrong with that Irish person. It's just something that's been passed down to them, maybe even in the cells of their body, right? This because the
Mm.
cells carrying an intelligence, right, that's been passed from the generation
Yeah,
to keep us
yeah.
safe.
And that's the safety is this such a great word that you use. And finding for me, at least when I was doing my traveling, it was so helpful to get off the island also. I think for many Irish people who leave, sometimes it's also a breath of fresh air. And
Yeah,
also then we can bring that fresh air back with us also,
yeah,
and to be around maybe people from other cultures because they're maybe different parts of us can blossom that couldn't in our collective
yeah.
milieu, and vice versa. When people come to Ireland, things can blossom in them that maybe could have never blossomed in their culture.
Mm.
But it's like you said, I think the key word is safety and finding community, I think is another important thing to where we can find pockets of safety to start opening up and exploring together. What's here? What's in between us? What's not being felt or spoken?
Beautiful.
And that's been a big part of my journey, finding community and trying to cultivate it also when I can.
Yeah.
And I believe that's wherever the world is going right now. I really believe community and coming together as much and as best we can is one of the solutions from my point of view. Really connecting, relating, finding safety. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. As I was going through my spiritual awakening, I was very fortunate. Simon approached me and as part of your thesis,
I,
was it, or
Part of
your
my training in a
your
way. Yeah.
training, right? You had to get a certain amount of hours in to
Hmm.
do your psychotherapy, right? And
Hmm.
you gifted me a whole load of sessions, right? And I mean, it was something that I had never really, I never contemplated doing therapy ever. I was like, I'll just keep meditating while I'm doing, you know, uh, it's working, right? It's like, and then all of a sudden there was the offer of psychotherapy. And I was like, well, it's just talking. What am I going to really, discover that's unresolved in me
Yeah.
with talking? And then we started, and I was actually really surprised by what came up. I had some issues related to my mother that came up. There was some abandonment issues. I just didn't know they were there. They were buried somewhere, right? And you had this beautiful skill of like, kind of coaxing that out of me, guiding me through these sessions. And I mean, there was I know, right? There's no mistakes. I had to have them sessions, right? It was this was really important for me. And the
Mm.
universe just facilitated it through Simon. So, I mean, can we talk a little bit about like what you do in your sessions and how you
Hmm.
work with people?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot has changed, but maybe developed since you and I met
Yeah,
all those years ago.
yeah,
But one thing came to me while you were talking. I've heard that also before. Why should I do talk therapy? We're just talking.
yeah.
And I think that was maybe an attitude I held myself, to be honest, also when I was growing up as a teenager in my early 20s. And it wasn't until I think I met other skilled people in this area or where there is a level of precision and being met and seen that I think I was also maybe a bit like you, just a bit blown away that when I feel seen and met for who I am, I think there's a natural response of opening that happens like unconsciously. It's like a surrendering that the body just, and then tears can come or different things come out of your mouth that you never heard yourself say before. And
Appreciating someone, like
yeah,
really, just telling them how nice they are and how much they mean to you. It can do wonders, right?
yeah. And it's that attunement. It's that attunement to the moment with the person you're with. Like you said, what I may say to you in the moment might be very different to what I say to someone else in the
Mm,
moment I'm with them.
yeah.
So it's that attuning to what's needed now. Where is Gar now? And how are we doing? What am I noticing in me as we're talking? And I think it's almost like if your inner tuning fork is going at 400 hertz, and I can find where 400 hertz lives in me, then there's a deep resonance. And that's where, when that can happen on every level from 1 to 400, let's say, if that can be met in with the person you're with, then something that hasn't been met either in a person's whole life, maybe, or very briefly, then something can start opening. If and that's the principle of include and transcend then for the therapist or the healer, that as many hurts can as I can include in me, I can meet in the person I'm with. I cannot teach what I don't embody. I cannot really heal what I don't embody.
Yeah.
So if I have 400 hertz in me and I notice that's coming up in you, then we can meet there very easily.
And also what is unresolved in you will be mirrored back to you and your students, right?
You're smiling as you said that also. But
Yeah.
yeah, of course. But that's also the beautiful thing of life. Life is a self-healing mechanism. I see it with my kids. I see it with my two little girls. It's like their little tuning forks, let's say that their age, they're touching my little tuning forks at the same age. And I've noticed these past few years that wow, I they have also been in the dark for me or buried. I have disconnected or distanced from a very young age. And so my two little girls who are just living their life, vibrating that frequency on their tuning fork at that age, it automatically hits my tuning fork.
Mm,
And whatever I'm not relating to there in myself, that's the agency piece, then I'm going to notice the symptoms. I'm going to notice, Papa's getting really angry right now. But it's Papa's stuff because maybe it's easier to get angry than to feel a lot of grief. And maybe that's grief gets touched because of something that my daughters bring up. So it's the same principle as a student and their
mm,
teacher and vice versa.
yeah. So, okay. So, I mean, this is a skill, right? This is not just you do a couple of sessions. This seems like a lifetime of dedication and skill and really like being willing to learn and go places that you probably never wanted to go before.
In a way, yeah. And I think some people are born and gifted with this skill. Like many healers, they come into the world like this. And I think this is something you can cultivate. You can really like, I think for me, I also just really gave myself to this of trying to just really feel what's happening. What do I
Mm,
feel when I talk? Does the words I speak and the way I feel, are they one, non-dual, or are they two? Is there a duality? And I think that's the start of kind of finding coherence in yourself also. Does what I say match what I feel?
mm,
And I think that's also part of the therapeutic process then also. We catch ourselves saying things we never heard and we feel then, wow, it evokes this feeling.
Mhm. So the spiritual bypassing, right?
Right.
I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah,
come
yeah,
back
yeah.
because it's something I keep seeing. I
Mm.
keep being faced with people who just want to go, I want to transcend. I want to have that spiritual awakening and
Mm.
all my problems disappear. I'm free of the human. Unbounded peace. I'm unbounded awareness. But from my experience, okay, yes, that can happen, but we always come back, right? It's like there's an elastic band that pulls us back
Right,
into the body, right? We still
right,
have to face our boss or our partner or our children.
right.
And that can be messy, and I
Yeah.
can, I can see people. There's so many great people out there who have,
Mm.
profound awakenings, but they don't know how to be with other people. They don't know how to connect.
Right. So there's the intelligence again, that disconnecting from my emotions, from myself, is better than feeling them. That's kind of the underlying theme of spiritual bypass, bypassing something towards a spiritual, maybe ideal, like all the angels have their trumpets when I have this great, amazing awakening. But if I live in the ideal, or I'm just constantly looking to the ideal, which I also did, I know spiritual bypass very well.
Yeah,
I'm not really tending to what's real, the reality, what's really happening here. Am I really here? And
yeah.
I'm most likely not. I'm most likely disconnected, or maybe I'm somewhere here.
Or in the future, right? We
Right.
we don't want to be in the present moment.
Yeah. And then to not, again, to not pathologize it, but to see it as a symptom of something else. That maybe that's better than really being in my body. Because what I know of being in my body is that it's scary, or it's uncomfortable, or it's their shame. And maybe I never had somebody be with me in those moments. So I'm used to being alone in it. And so I don't want to be alone with all that intensity. It's also too much for a child to be alone. It's the
Mhm.
gift of the beauty of trauma in a way. It can help us disconnect, fragment, push aside so that we can keep developing while other parts of us are frozen in time, like a
Yeah,
time, space, and rhythm. This is kind of the work I've been learning with one of my teachers, Thomas Hubel,
yeah.
where we talk about how time, space, and rhythm can get distorted, and like something gets kind of caught in a, yeah, in a bubble of time. You can go time traveling essentially in oneself with different, again, we're back to those, maybe the different frequencies of the tuning forks.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a bit abstract, but tell me if that kind of
Sure,
answers
sure.
your question.
And I'd also love, like, can we just trauma, right? People just throw trauma around so
Mm.
much. Oh,
Mhm.
I'm traumatized by that. And a lot of the time, people aren't traumatized. It's just
Mm.
a word they use. But
Right.
can we actually talk about, like, what real trauma is? What happens in our bodies? What is that process? One of the things I see with people is, right, they're starting on their spiritual journey and they start awakening. Right? And an awakening is an unfolding into everything, right? An allowance of everything as it is, an expansion of our consciousness out into the collective consciousness. Whereas trauma seems to be a contraction, the complete
Mm.
opposite of what spiritual awakening is. And I find that when I'm working with people, the ones that seem to have trauma, stuck in their system, they really struggle to have that flowering of consciousness.
Right, because it
It's,
was never safe. It
it
was
wasn't
maybe
safe.
never safe to fully expand as a child.
Yeah.
That expansion into pleasure and playfulness may be fraught with fear. And, Gabor Mate says something really great. There's this quote that I also learned in my NARM training, is one modality I use. They gave this quote from him where he says, a child given the option of authenticity, again, we use that word essence or beingness, authenticity or attachment, that child will always choose attachment. So, what that is to say is the child will always choose their connection, their attachment connection to their mother and father, than who they really are, because it's existential. The connection to mom and dad is so important. To lose that it's way worse than losing a part of yourself.
Yeah.
So trauma in a way is ways of managing this. When something is too much, too soon, too big, too fast, or too little, this is when the body needs to respond in such a way to protect the rest of the nervous system
So what happens,
development.
Simon? What happens?
Well, different things can happen, such as fragmentation. Fragmentation, different parts of self get fragmented. Maybe we identify with one aspect that helps us move on, being a people pleaser or caregiving a lot, kind of as a strategy to get our love from mom and dad and sense of self-worth. But actually, who we really are, some of our essence, actually, we had to push away because maybe it wasn't fully welcomed or didn't feel safe or we weren't honored in it. So there, contraction, as you said, numbing, distancing. So these are also, I just want to name something that was revelatory for me, that it's not a noun like fragmented. I'm fragmented. It's no, I think a beautiful and better way to put it is I am constantly fragmenting myself. I am constantly distancing from this part of myself. I am numbing myself. And so that's where agency can come in then, that it's an active process that I'm doing maybe unconsciously in the beginning. But as I start to become aware of it, I can start to change my relationship to my numbing. I can be with it. I can feel that in me, which needed to numb from a young age, maybe.
Mm, mm,
And the more I can be with it and maybe be related to as I'm doing it, then maybe energy can really move. Maybe tears come. Maybe there's actually grief that was too much too soon to feel at that age can finally come up in the safe space of a container. And that container can be a one on one or a group space or whatever is a safe space. Ideally, mom and dad are the first container we're born into.
mm.
And I think in a way that's kind of it for me.
So
If that
Simon, immediately I'm brought back to being a child and doing something wrong, right? And uh, knowing that I have to apologize and apologizing and it being rejected, right? My
mm,
apology being rejected. And that
mm,
then echoing out through my teenage years, my early, 20s, that I found it very difficult to apologize to someone for fear of being rejected.
right. So that's
Yeah.
again, that's where we're back to those little
That was a trauma, right?
those bubbles exactly of time and space. In that moment, it sounds like maybe for you, time and space got distorted. Whatever happened in you, how you managed that situation,
Never
sounded like
apologize. Never apologize because you're going to be
right,
rejected and you're going to feel
right,
stupid.
right, right. So better to not apologize
Yeah.
than to ever feel those feelings again.
Yeah.
And so what we notice is that it's about me feeling these feelings in me. It's not about the other person
Yeah.
apologizing. When you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and it's not about that anymore.
Yeah.
But we don't see it in the moment. We think it's about our partner or our boss or whatever. And we don't realize actually I made this decision long ago.
Mm.
And in the safety of there's another saying that goes, what is hurt in relation can only be healed in relation.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think
Mm.
that's a mostly true statement. I'm sure there's some circumstances where like a Ramana Maharshi type situation where there's so
Yeah.
much of a big bang kind of where
Yeah.
there's so much light in the system that things are just healed in a way. I'm sure that's possible. But for the
So,
most majority of us, I believe what's hurt in relation needs a
yeah.
relational context to heal. That's
Yeah.
my belief at the moment, anyway.
Yeah. So I agree, for me anyway, with my awakening, some of them awakening, some of them beautiful experiences that I've had, the Kundalini rising, a lot of stuff got healed.
Mm,
It got healed,
mm,
but there was certain things, right? And this is
mm,
why I found it so beautiful when I worked with you, because I couldn't access it with my intellect, right?
right.
Usually what happens is you need someone who's skilled, who can guide you, but they're almost like a surgeon, the way they'll kind of, make
Mm,
these incisions, right? And allows it to kind of bleed out into your reality so you can kind of feel it. But I mean, I remember having this sense of like, oh, I can be myself around my friends. I can actually be the person that I want to be But when I go home, I can't be that person anymore. I have to come back to a certain protective mechanism that I had,
Mm.
right? Because I didn't want to be laughed at, didn't want to be made fun of.
You can notice how expansion there for you was actually threatening.
Yeah, big
You
time. Yeah.
know, that was a really threatening thing to expand in a place where your fear system is active. It's not possible.
And it was
Only,
nobody's fault.
no, right, but it's happening in you. That's the
Yeah.
point. And that's why I think when you said maybe with some of your own work you're doing with people, there's going to be places where a person might touch where expanding may actually be very threatening to their
Mm,
identity
mm,
because that identity of contraction was so important at a foundational level to protect the whole nervous system. And so I think that's like it's honoring that, yeah, this is hard and don't push it. It'll
mm.
come. But that's then again, that's maybe the spiritual bypass. If people want to race to the finish line, what's that about?
Yeah.
Which was something in me. That's why I asked that question.
It's in everybody. I see it in
Yeah,
everybody. Well, most
yeah.
people,
Or it's even it's
me
you see it in the
included.
marketplace. Exactly. I want to get rich quick. I want to have big biceps, or whatever it is. I want to have this really quick. Amazon, next day delivery. It's also in the culture. It's not just spirituality. It just
Yeah.
shows up there also.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Simon. Beautiful. So, someone on their spiritual path, right? They have enough awareness in them that they can see maybe there's a bit of spiritual bypassing going on. Maybe, just maybe, there is something in me that's unresolved.
Mm.
Instead of trying to meditate my way out of this, maybe I have to go inwards, right? Really go through it. So, what do they do, Simon? Where do they start?
I think, as I said earlier, one thing that helped me a lot was finding community, finding other people. So I think whatever feels right to that person, whether it's going if meditation or yoga or going to an energetic healer or going to a psychotherapist or a
Mm,
counselor or a coach, great. I think whatever feels, again, we come back to that calling. Where do you feel called to? And
mm,
I think that gets refined the more you can listen. And I think in a very practical way, what I'll say is triad work has helped me a lot. And triad, again, being three of us sitting together, maybe on Zoom. Maybe you're sitting there in Ireland, I'm here in Germany, someone else in Lithuania, whatever. We sit down together and we just take 10 minutes each to just really connect in and see what's the lowest hanging fruit in my emotional body today. And I'm going to speak from that place as best as I can because it's so easy to speak about, again, about top down. Like it's easy to speak on the news about what's happening in the world. But if you
mm,
could speak from what's happening in our bodies, collectively, what's happening, then it's an invitation to really have an emergent experience and to really be in touch with what's alive for us in the container of a safe triad space. So that can be a dyad, it can be one on one, it can be a triad, it can be a therapist, it can be group therapy, it can be a community that are focused on this kind of work.
yeah.
I think it's specific to the individual, and
Mm,
but I definitely think, at least from my bias side, relation helps a lot when it comes to the growing up and the cleaning up, whether it's mentorship, community, therapy, having it some kind of teacher, maybe if that's what is good for you, go for it. It's
and
intention, I think, at the end of the day.
and this is me learning from you and the way you communicate and you've helped me so much over the years was like when we communicate with somebody and we notice something in us, right? We can say, "Oh, you know, you said this and it hurt me," or "You've done this to me," and it's all you. But I always noticed that with you, you always directed it to, I notice what's happening in me when
Mm,
when this has been communicated, right? When we talk about this, when I move into my body, I notice that what you're saying is creating a tightness or
mhm.
yeah,
I think that's an important step. Again, that's back to agency of how can I kind of start to take more responsibility for my piece of this as best as I can. And without doing the finger pointing or
yeah,
projection as best I can. Maybe I
yeah,
do.
yeah.
And then I say, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I totally blamed you there. But actually, I was feeling really sad and I didn't want to feel that.
And it doesn't create as much friction, right? Because if you blame someone, all of a sudden they go on the defense. Oh, you're blaming me. I didn't do anything.
Sure.
How dare
Yeah.
you? And all, straight
Sure.
away. But if you
Yeah.
point it back to what's happening in me, maybe, right? Just
Mm.
from this conversation,
Hmm.
it diffuses everything. So maybe that's a really great place for people to start,
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
not fly off the handle and blame the other person, but to go, okay, when I come inside and I feel into my body, I notice that.
Right, exactly. And this is where meditative or contemplative practices are so helpful. Cultivating that inner space so that you're even aware, you can even have that awareness of what's happening. That's where, again, where they can beautifully intertwine and support one another. That, yeah, you know what? My fear is that you're going to take this the wrong way, or my fear is you're going to get angry when I say this.
Yeah.
But actually, my hope is that we can really connect. And I feel this way. And there's things like nonviolent communication and circling and different things that people can try. And it may sound maybe artificial or robotic sometimes when you're practicing ways of connecting to self. And I really believe in just letting yourself be messy with the intention of connection. My intention here is to connect, and I may be very messy, but this is why I'm here. You know what? I did project. I'm sorry. I take that back. It's that I think it's just that willingness to show up in the relation as much as and as honestly as you can, and as authentically, as messy and in your muddiness and your humanity. And then with the intention, though, that I'm coming really from a place of goodness and I'm really wanting to listen to your side. And I think that's that curiosity, that underlying curiosity and goodness and wanting to connect. That's, I think, does most of the work.
That's really beautiful, Simon. Yeah. So for me, we're here to master the self, right? We're not just here to transcend. We have to come back into the body. We have, like, this is, to me, this is a lifetime of work, right? And
Mm.
yes, I may have had some profound awakenings, right? But there's always more for me to learn in this, right? In relationship. And I'm always learning from you. Every interaction that we have, I feel that I learn something. I come away
Mm.
better. I have a better, my skill set is broadening, and it's incredible. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, Gareth. And I want to just say also, it's about also appreciating people for what they've chosen to cultivate in their lives. Not everyone needs to go through what I go through. That's been my calling. Not
yeah.
everyone is going to go through what you go through as your calling, but I think it's just honoring, wow, this person really went the whole way with waking up. They didn't really tend to these other areas, like at least in the Ken Wilber integral context, but wow, I can really bow down to what they've done here. And it may not resonate how they teach or what they do with their students, but I can honor the realization and vice versa. I can honor this person's really great with their students, but they haven't really had a greater awakening. That's also okay. So I just want to say that as well, that it's honoring each person for what they've been called to cultivate and do in this life also.
Hmm. And bridging the two, Simon?
Bridging the two, same one.
I mean, so for me, right, it's like I've kind of gone that
Ah, that's
full
okay. Right,
circle, right, with the
right, right.
awakening, right? And I really want to come down into the work that you're doing, back into
Mm,
the body. I want to be able to communicate, right?
mm,
Because we get so much wrong, right? At least I have, really like listening to another person and hearing them.
mm.
All my life I've gotten it wrong. It's just something that we do, right? We just get it
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah, I see what you mean by Bridget. Thanks for explaining. I think this is where love, that word love comes into it, where these higher states, if for those of us who have in any way cultivated higher states of consciousness or expanded states, to bring it down and in, for me, when I said earlier of wisdom, it's also permeating life, matter, the earth, as we are earth. We are the earth with
Hmm.
love. It is expanding love here on earth instead of wanting to get away from earth, to get away from the mother in a way.
Hmm.
Bringing it down, I think this is for me bridging the two, to bring these expanded into the body, letting it transmit from the body. rather than being those halos we have around the head. You know, you see these in churches, but letting the halo be around the whole body. That light permeates every cell, and that shows up in your relations in a way where your time, your space, your rhythm, yeah, can be fully authentically you. And where it's not, that's where you can tend to then, either in relationship or your triad or in a with a healer or a therapist, whatever.
Mm.
So I really see how both can really support the other, especially where we are in the 21st century, where so much is falling apart and there's a poly crisis. And now more than ever, I think we need collective solutions. We need people in their bodies as much as and as safe as possible.
Beautiful, Simon. Beautiful.
Mm.
I mean, just incredible. I love it. So I'm going to link to your website. Is there anything else you'd like me to include, Simon?
Not, no, I just want to name that I think it's as I'm doing my own ancestral work right now, for example, I want to thank, you know, I'm not here today because of myself. I'm standing on the shoulders of my family, my ancestry, my collective, and all the teachers and
Your
healers that I've
teachers.
met as
Yeah.
well through the years. I want to just kind of thank and honor everyone who has ever taught me or inspired me or even fought with me in a way that it's every relationship has helped cultivate my inner relationship to self also. So it feels important to end with also honoring everyone who came before and everyone who's helped me on my path.
Mm.
Yeah, that's it.
And your work is a blessing, Simon. I hope so many people come across this
And
video.
thank you, Gareth.
Honestly,
Yeah.
yeah.
I appreciate you having me on. It's really, I know been a while trying to come together.
I've been after you for so long. I mean, I just wanted to get this conversation out there
Yeah.
because again, I come across so many people, brilliant people. Everybody I meet is brilliant, but everybody wants, not everybody, but a lot of people, they just want to bypass the human stuff. And I
Mm,
think it's so important that they hear people like you speaking on this and just give them some sort of an awareness like that. Oh, hang on, right? I'm always back in my body. This beautiful, like it's like this beautiful device that we have, this sensing, feeling, tasting, touching, immediate feedback. If we get it wrong, we feel it in our hearts, right?
mm,
People don't
mm,
want to use this. They want to just transcend. And, even me when I started out, right? I wanted to have out of body experiences. I
mm.
wanted to get out of my body.
Right. Right.
And
That's what I
now
meant by getting away from mother, getting away from
yeah.
our body as Mother Earth, getting away from life in a way that we just honor. That was a really helpful thing at some point. And not to pathologize it in any way, because I definitely done it myself, that this was really necessary at some point of your development and collectively probably as well. You know, if there's an Irish famine, you're not going to want to really be around to feel what's happening.
Mhm.
You're want to gonna get out of there.
Or,
So
or
dissociating,
drink
disconnecting,
whiskey and poutine and
drinking,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And that's to honor those things. Maybe not to try and continue, but to honor that was so important and functional and good that we did that so that we're here today. And that we can slowly, because it's safer now for a lot of us, not all of us on the planet, those of us who do feel safe and feel cold can start tending to the individual. And then maybe ancestral stuff comes up and maybe collective. But again, it's you listening to your authentic call will give you where you're supposed to go.
One more thing just before we finish, right? So it seems, right, that we really have to come into the body. We really have to acknowledge our traumas and we can't bypass them, right? We can't have someone take them away either, right? It's like when I did psychotherapy with you, it's like it's not that we talked our way around it, right? It was like that we gave it, what's the word? Almost like permission to be felt. It came up. I was like, there was times I'd leave our sessions and I'd come away and I go, oh, I feel shit now after that session and I have to be with this and it feels horrible, right? And that was me feeling that and being with it and releasing it. So like we're never, nothing is ever taken away for us. Would you agree with that? That we still have
No.
to do the work.
Yeah, right. We still have to do the work, but we don't have to do it alone. I
Yeah.
really believe we've grown up in the 20th and now 21st century with this kind of hyper individualized society. You know, you see it in Instagram culture or
Yeah.
social media. Everyone's showing maybe how great their life is and how much they're doing. And it's obviously true as well. You can do a lot alone, but we need each other. No one can take it away from me, but people can help me, as you said, give me permission through the safety of our shared relation that I can finally feel, which was too terrifying to feel as a little boy or in a shocking moment of my life. I maybe finally feel safe to release this and let my body cry or whatever. So again, no one can take it away, but people can certainly help and support and just be there. Sometimes it's not even saying anything, just knowing that you feel me, that you're really feeling me right now is permission enough that it can come up.
Holding a space for that person without
Yeah,
judgment.
right. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gareth.
Thank you to
Mm,
everybody who tunes in and has
mm.
watched this or listened to it on the podcast. And please check out Simon's work. The website is simoncourtney.com, right?
That's right. I try to keep it as simple as possible.
It's pretty simple. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
guys, thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you,
Absolute
Gareth.
blessing to have you
It's a
on. Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.